Hello everyone and welcome to another video from my narrowboat. If you're new here, my name is Laura and I am a kitchen witch. I make ritual recipes from my tiny galley kitchen, sewing ceremony and magic into my everyday. I use the folklore, the stories and the magical properties of flowers, herbs, seasonings and all kinds of food to create my recipes that are also spells. They are ways of sowing intention into your day, either in a big way or a small way. And I'm also a prolifically curious person and I'm very interested in the history of witchcraft, folk magic, folklore in general, where these traditions, these rituals, where they came from and how we can apply them to today. And today I wanted to show you what's on my bookshelf. This is a question that I get asked all the time. What kind of books am I using? What kind of books do I recommend? And I think this is going to be quite a different collection to your average witchy book collection video, because I don't have that many books that are directly telling you how to do witchcraft. I don't have many books about the correspondences within things like Wicca. That's sort of my background. That's where my craft originated. I'm very eclectic in my practice. I'm way more interested in foraging, in the old stories, in how the medicinal uses of plants have evolved and flowers, and the history of witchcraft. So that's where the majority of my practice lies. This is only about a quarter of the books that I have. My boat actually lists slightly. She leans to one side ever so slightly. I do think part of the reason for that is that my bookshelves, both of my bookshelves, are on the starboard side of my boat, so she's very slightly leans starboard, and I think it's the sheer weight and volume of the books that I have. If I go anywhere, if I visit a museum, if I visit a new city, if I go to a national trust, a castle, an English heritage site, I'm probably coming home with a book. I don't really wear jewellery, I don't buy clothes that often, but the one thing that I love buying, even if I don't read them, there are a few books here that are on my to read list that I'm also going to show you. A lot of them I just dip in and out. That's the kind of books that I enjoy, books that I can just dip in and out of. And so I want to show you my collection. I want to show you what I use to make my videos. I think for anyone who's interested in foraging or folklore or folk magic, this will be a really good collection for you to see, and there's probably books in here that you want to read too. So I am going to split it up into categories because I have about 50 books here. I'm not going to show them all to you, but I was finding it really difficult to sort of cut it down, and I've left out a lot of the foraging books because I've just picked my favourite ones. But I like all of these books for different reasons. Some of them have really nice illustrations. Some of them I like the way that they're laid out or the way that they are designed to be used. So I have kept a lot of the books in, but I'm not going to go through it with a fine tooth comb. I'll just show you what the books are and what I like about them, what they're useful for. So the first category is correspondences. So these are the books that I primarily use to design my rituals, to design my recipes, to design my spell work based on the folklore, the stories, the magical properties of the ingredients, of the flowers, the fruits, the seasonings, the herbs, the spices, the vegetables, whatever it might be. So the first book on my list is this one. This is The Physic Garden, Ancient Cures for Modern Maladies. It is by Alice Smith, and what I like about this book primarily, apart from the beautiful illustrations, is the way that it's categorized. It's sort of a medicinal compendium, and it's categorized not via the plant but via the body. So the plants are grouped together for the head, you know, the brain, the nerves, the eyes, the chest, the heart, the blood, the lymphs, the lungs, the throat, the abdomen, the pelvis, and the skeleton. If you've got a headache, you would go to this book and see what you might use. Not all of them are things that we would still use today. Some of it is superstition. Some of the plants in the book are even harmful. So it's more of a history book than anything, but I very much use it for those medicinal ailments. I look up how certain plants were used for those ailments, and so it kind of contains the history of where those correspondences between plant and body have come from. So some of it harps back to things like the doctrine of signatures, which decrees that every plant has sort of a visual clue or a signature that would relate it to a body part, and that is the plant that you should be using to cure that body part. So for instance, in the doctrine of signatures, the walnut would cure the brain because it looks like a mini brain, and funnily enough it does contain a lot of omega-3, which is great for the brain. The carrot as old wives' tales go, and also the doctrine of signatures, if you cut a carrot down the middle, it kind of looks like an eye. It looks like an iris and a pupil. The carrot was said to help see in the dark or help cure any ailments with your eyes. Funnily enough, carrots contain a lot of vitamin A, which is great for eyesight. So this is by no means a instruction manual. It's more of points of interest of how plants have been used historically for different body parts. And I just love the illustrations, and I love the way that it's categorized by body part rather than by plant. This book by Sandra Lawrence, I guess in conjunction with Q. I don't know if they published it, I don't know if they produced it, but it is something to do with Q, and I bought it from Kew Gardens. So this is The Witch's Garden. So again, very much my kind of thing. It's a really detailed book on various different plants and their folklore, their stories, their history, their medicinal uses. While it doesn't out and out say, you know, this is the magical property, just through the stories within the book and the folklore, you can kind of work out what each plant would be used for. Again, not all of them are edible. This isn't designed for kitchen witchery by any means. There are poisons in here for sure, but I love the illustrations in the book. I love the look of the book, and it's categorized really well into simple chapters, and it does also contain a lot of plants in there that you would eat and that do have medicinal uses and are edible and can be used in recipes. This book by Christina Oakley Harrington is from Treadwell's, and Christina Oakley Harrington is the owner of Treadwell's, which is an incredible bookshop, an esoteric, occult, sort of witchy bookshop. They do the most incredible events both online and in store. I go to their talks and lectures all of the time. What I love about Treadwell's in particular is that it takes magic very seriously. Magic and witchcraft and spirituality, the esoteric, is framed very much as an academic exploration rather than a gimmick and a quirk. Like, you know, witchcraft is not just for Halloween, and so the events that they put on are very much reflected back in that, and I have learned so much from their events. I've been to lectures about necromancy, chaos magic, fairies, tarot, all kinds of different things, and they're always really like highbrow. They're often by doctors and lecturers, and they're really affordable, and yeah, it's just an absolutely wonderful institution for the sort of anyone who's interested in the occult and the esoteric, and also, you know, the witchy community within London. So I'm really grateful to Treadwell's that they continue to make such efforts to be such an amazing place, but I am going to talk about them more deeply in a different video, so I'll stop going on about the bookshop for now. This book is very similar to my most used book, which I'm going to get to in a minute. It very simply lays out the magical correspondences of lots of different plants and herbs and spices. It's no frills, there's no illustrations, there's no flotsam and jetsam. It's literally just the information, and I find it incredibly useful. There is information in this book that isn't in my other correspondence books, and so I find it incredibly useful, especially if I'm working with, say, pick a herb, any herb, a yarrow. I will look it up in all of my correspondence books to see what each of them says, and it's a really good way of like cross-referencing what I'm doing. I mean, again, magic is very much about intention, so substitutions are a huge part of magic. It's really good to have multiple correspondence books, and I do very much recommend this one. Floral Folklore is quite similar to the Witch's Garden and the Physic Garden. Again, it's folklore all about flowers, so they're not necessarily edible flowers, but there are many edible flowers in this book, and I think what I like the most about this book is the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. You know, I'm an illustrator myself, so I am just an absolute sucker. Gorgeous illustration, and it does have the origin of the folklore and the meaning of the flower in very simple terms, and then a longer explanation, and each of them even has a ritual at the end of the explanation. It's not necessarily an edible ritual, but it's a ritual all the same of how to work the herb, how to use the herb. So for me, this is very much a witch's handbook for flowers, and I love it. I think it's a beautiful book. It's by Alison Davies, and it's illustrated by Sarah Wildling. Lovely book. Another correspondence book, and again, I got this one from Treadwell's too when I went to a sort of book launch and talk by the author of this book, which is Albert Bjorn. So this is about Icelandic plant magic. So again, the plants in this book and the meanings in this book are probably going to differ from the ones that are British Isles specific or European specific. All of this does depend on where you live. So for me, it's really, really interesting to see the differences and also the similarities between what Icelandic folk medicine and folk magic was using their plants for versus what the British Isles and European folklore were doing. I'm sure I'm going to get a big collection of these correspondence books from all over the world so that I can cross-reference and look at what all different cultures were using their plants for, both medicinally and magically, and look at the folklore, because yeah, some of these plants seem to be the same everywhere that you look, which is amazing, because how have they evolved to have the same sort of meaning all over the world with cultures that were disconnected? But that is definitely a video for another time. We cannot get into that right now. It's a big subject. So on to my favourite correspondence book, probably my most used book out of all of these books. And if you know anything about plant folklore, about plant magic, you will be very familiar with this book. This is Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs. It is by Scott Cunningham, of course. I just love this book. You can see how dog-eared it is because I use it all the time. So really simple and useful. It's in alphabetical order, and it's simply a huge list of plants and their magical meanings. It will give you the corresponding planet of the plant, the element, the powers, the magical uses, some history, some folklore behind it, and an illustration. At the back, it's got some really quick correspondences as well. So if you are looking, for instance, for luck, you can just quickly go to the back of the book. Allspice, aloe, bamboo, banyan, bee still, bluebell, cabbage, calamus, chinaberry, cotton, daffodil, devil's bit, razor paradise, hazel, heather, holly. You get the idea. If you're designing spell recipes, this is an amazing book so that you can just do it very, very quickly and then explore the longer implications of the plant, the longer folklore and stories of the plant, and then cross-reference them with other correspondence books about plant magic. If I implore you to get any book on my list, if you're interested in plant magic, if you're interested in kitchen witchery, obviously my book, which we'll get to, but secondary to that, it would be this one. It's a classic. So kitchen witchcraft aside, I'm just going to do a little sidebar for plant magic that doesn't involve anything edible. So this is the kind of spells that you can do with the plants that you find that you can't eat. You can't put them in your recipes because they're poisonous. I think it's really important to know your enemy, for one, but also listen to what the plants are teaching us. Listen to the fact that there are two sides to the coin when it comes to things like cures and medicinal uses. There are also the poisons. Every plant has a use, even if it's something that you can't eat. For instance, the yew tree is one of the most incredible trees that we have. Every single part of that tree, apart from the flesh around the seeds of the berries, is highly poisonous. So poisonous that it changed the course of human history, because ancient Britons would use the yew tree not only for their longbows, their legendary longbows, but also they would carve their arrows from the wood of the yew tree. And one of the reasons why they did this is that if the initial strike didn't kill you, the wood getting inside your system would do, because it's so toxic. Latin name for yew tree, can't remember the whole thing, so don't ask me, but part of it is taxan, toxin. The etymology of the word is one and the same. Just to hammer home the point that not every poison is useless, one of the things that we use the yew tree for today is as a cancer treatment. It is one of the most powerful cancer treatments out there. So yes, it is a poison, but it still has a medicinal use. It still has a place in our society. It has been protecting us for thousands of years. It's just that we've changed the way that we use it for protection. So just because you can't eat something doesn't mean that it isn't useful to you in some way. If you work with plants, if you're interested in the folklore and history of plants, it can't all be about the nice, sweet, delicate teas. You also have to look at the darker side of things. So a few books regarding poison. I really love these little books that you get. I've got a few of them. I've got the Alchemist's Kitchen too, and I've got one about the zodiac, and I've got one about numerology. I just think they're really cute and they're really easy to like get a good amount of information in a very sweet little collectible book. So this one's by Frederick Gillam and it's called Poisonous Plants in Great Britain. Highly recommend this book, it's really useful. Another one is Botanical Cures and Poisons, The Shadow Lives of Plants. Again, the title of this book is exactly what I'm talking about. It's the shadow lives of plants. We have a shadow of ourselves, so do the plants, so does everything. And this book is absolutely full of interesting information. I won't say that I've read it cover to cover, but I've been dipping in and out of it whenever I come across a plant or I want to learn more about a certain plant, and it's got a lot of good info in there. And then this one is called Poison, The History of Potions, Powders and Murderous Practitioners. This is by Ben Hubbard. This is about the plants itself, but it's more about how those plants have been used over the years as a poison, how they've changed history, how they've impacted people's lives by being used as poisons. And again, it's just really interesting. It tells you the toxic effects of the plant, the symptoms, the treatment, and famous poisonings by the plant. So it's a really fun one to dip in and out of, because like I say, I'm endlessly curious. I'm very interested in history, especially when it comes to anything esoteric, plant-based, and yeah, witchy. My next category is how to find these plants, how to identify them so that you can utilize them. I've got numerous books about foraging, but a lot of them are quite interchangeable. You know, it's a picture of a plant with info about the plant, where you might find it. So I've just chosen my 3 favourite ones. So this is the Collins Wildflowers of Britain and Europe. It's by W. Lipper and D. Podleck. What I like about this book specifically is, one, it fits in your pocket. Literally, you can take it out with you, so that if you see a plant while you're out and you've never met it before and you're curious about what it is, it's very easy to just pull this book out and try and find it. Because another thing that I love about it is that it's categorized by colour. So it's quite colour coded. So if you see a plant out there and it's pink, you can go straight to the pink section, flip through it and see if you can find the plant that you're looking for. It has really clear photographs, which is very useful. Most of these foragey books tend to be illustrated, which is not a bad thing. The illustrations are usually botanical, so they show you the points on the plant that you're looking out for. But again, it's good to be able to cross-reference that with a book that has photographs. Before touching a plant, and you know, especially eating a plant, but even before touching a plant with your bare hands, you want to be really sure of what it is and that it is what you think it is. So I would definitely recommend cross-referencing each plant that you find with something illustrative and something photographic, just so that you're absolutely sure. This book is kind of an in-between between the correspondence books that I showed you and a foraging book, and it tells you the habitat of where to find each plant. It does have a little section about the plant's history. It's not necessarily always the medicinal properties, the magical properties, the folklore, but sometimes it is, and it is useful to have another book that has photographs and habitat. But this is by far my favourite book to use for identifying and foraging plants. It is big, it's a chunky book. You're not going to want to carry it around with you, which is why I have my little pocket one for identification. But it is very full of information and it has lots of plants in here. This is specifically a guide to the edible plants of Britain, because I live in Britain. So I'm not looking at plants that grow in Greece or Africa, because I don't live there. This is by Miles Irving. One thing that I absolutely love is that most of the plants in here are lists of distinguishing features, so that you're able to identify it really clearly. It does have a little bit of information about the uses or the recipes, so it'll tell you, you know, what part of the plant is used, what it is used for. So it's a really, really good overview of all of the other books. I just continue to buy many books, even though I think a lot of it is the same sort of information but recategorized and just regurgitated in different ways. Like, I like the correspondence books because they have beautiful illustrations, they're really nice to use, but this is better for just straight up information. If you're not interested in the bells and whistles, I think these 2 books together work really, really well for kitchen witchcraft. witchcraft. And speaking of kitchen witchcraft, next I'm going to go through a few books that have like recipes in them, so that now that you've looked at the background of these plants, you've looked at the folklore, the history, the magical uses, the medicinal properties, and you found out how to identify them, and you've identified them correctly, what do you do with them? So some of these that I've included for myself are more like inspiration. They're old cures, they don't necessarily make any sense, but for me, they're not recipes that I would necessarily follow, but they are just informative, inspiring, and curiosity provoking. So Brews and Potions, which has been compiled by Maurice Ricards. This is a handbook of remedies, spells, elixirs, cordials, and aphrodisiacs, and this is full of really interesting mad recipes. The French method for the bite of a mad dog. The syrup of snails. You must prick your snails and stew sugar upon them and hang them in a bag and catch the droppings. Drink a draught thrice a day. See, I won't be doing that, but it might inspire me to make a more delicious recipe based on the idea. I don't know what I would make from that though. To cure the itch, though of long continuance. So an itch you've had for a while. I'm not saying to necessarily use these. It's just interesting. It's a good jumping off point for creating my own personal remedies, rituals, and sort of like my modern take on folk magic. It's really interesting to look at the past and to get inspired from there and make them into something that's more practical for 2025. If you can only get one book on this list, again, other than my book, of course, this is probably the book that I would get, because it kind of contains a mix of everything. It's really good for foraging because it has some really good illustrations that point out some focal points of the plant, the shape of the leaf, how the flowers look, how the berries look, and it's got everything that you kind of look for. It's got the history, it's got the medicinal uses, it's got the stories behind the plant, and it has a recipe. So I highly recommend this book as a catch-all for kitchen witchcraft. It's not designed to be for spells, for rituals, for anything that is intention based. So again, you might want to pair it with this one so that you know what you're actually imbuing into your recipes. You know the intention behind the plants that you're using. So that's the Hedgerow Handbook, Recipes, Remedies and Rituals by Adele Nozadar. A brilliant book, lovely illustrations, really to the point, useful, absolutely love it. The final book on my kitchen witchcraft section is my book, which is Kitchen Magic, 65 Enchanting Recipes and Rituals for a Cozy Witchy Kitchen. That's by me, Laura May. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I love this book. I love how it's come out. I'm so incredibly lucky that I had such an amazing team to work with for the photographs, and the illustrations is by a dear friend of mine, Roxanne Dewar. I just think it's come out so beautifully. Every single recipe in this book is designed as a vehicle for some kind of information. So it will be about the history of folk magic, or a folk practice that was performed in the 1700s, the 1800s or beyond. Or it will have information about the folklore, the stories behind a particular plant, a particular herb, a particular spice. You sort of graduate through the book. So you can use it in any way that you wish to. You can jump straight into making recipes. There is an introduction that is all about the history of witchcraft, and that sort of explains why, for me, plants and cooking is so synonymous with witchcraft. The two are incredibly interlinked. You actually cannot separate them, because the real definition of the witches who were killed during the witch craze, or who were persecuted during the times when witchcraft was seen as something evil, who these witches were not witches performing spells and evil. They were actually mostly just women who were healers, wise women who had plant knowledge, or they were performing abortions, they were healing their communities, they were using the resources around them. And as the medical institutions and the religious institutions grew with power, these people were a threat to that. They rebelled from that. They were using what they had growing nearby them, and also they were often outsiders, or people who were seen as somewhat inconvenient older women, for instance, who could not perform the same amount of physical labor that younger people, and especially men, could. And this wasn't always a problem. When the common land was taken away, physical labor became the only way to make money, to be able to eat. You couldn't just grow from the land, tend to the land, have a role in the community that wasn't physical labor. That was the only way to make money. And so women's roles within those communities became completely diminished, and they became burdens to their societies because they could not perform that back-breaking work that was required to survive. And so they were persecuted. They were blamed for disease, failure of crops, war even. They were the scapegoats of society. And, you know, historical records show that when times were tough, accusations of witchcraft surged. They went up because people needed someone to be angry at, so they needed someone to point the finger at, they needed a scapegoat. Sound familiar? The image of the witch, my definition of witch, is the same definition as who we were actually persecuting. Not magical beings on broomsticks putting spells on people, although I do a little bit of that. But I think anyone who is interested in plant magic, anyone who is interested in the folklore of plants, the history, the medicinal uses, the healing powers, people who are using the resources that they have growing near them, those outsiders, those people who go against society, we're all the witches now, and we always were. I go through some of that history in my book, What I Think a Witch Is, where all of these iconic things that are synonymous with the witch come from, like the pointy hat and the cat, and even the cauldron, the candles, the incense. I go through the core principles of witchcraft, so using the moon phases, using sigils, spoken word, candle colours, because what I used to do is have all of these many books about the different phases of the moon and the different colours of the candles, and I've sort of learned that over the years. So I don't really have huge books of correspondences anymore. I have those for the plants, but the basics of the moon phases, I sort of kind of know that by heart now. And there is a section in here called the Witch's Store Cupboard, which is a very condensed version of one of those correspondence books. So it's not looking at the plants, it's not looking at the poisons, it is specifically looking at what you probably already have in your cupboard right now. So some of the most prolific herbs, spices and ingredients. And then it's onto the recipes. Botanical Bakes is simply about 7 of my favourite flowers, how to use them, what they mean. And then you have a whole section called Ceremonials, which is based around the Wheel of the Year, but you don't have to make those recipes based around the Wheel of the Year. Most of these recipes will require the dried version of the plant or the herb or the flower, or all that is applicable, because I want you to be able to make these recipes anytime you want to. And obviously, you know, if you've had a year like this year where everything is incredibly early, because in the UK we've had one of the driest summers we've ever had. It's been really hot, it's barely rained, and all of the plants have popped out super early. And so, you know, the Wheel of the Year probably wouldn't even apply to this year, because you can't set your watch by the plants, so you don't have to take that verbatim. And I'm not even a witch who goes exactly to the day by the Wheel of the Year. I like looking at, you know, the things that you would traditionally do around this time of year, but I don't celebrate these days in the way that you would a sacred holiday. You know, it's not a doctrine, it's not a dogma, it's more of a guide to the seasons. Then you have a section about menstrual magic. So this is a way to either enhance or help soften the hormonal effects of the menstrual cycle, whether that be pain or mood swings, or there are even parts of the cycle when we're said to be more beautiful. So there's some glamour magic in there too. There's a whole section called Botanical Brews, which is drinks. And lastly, there's a long chapter at the back called Practical Magic. So these recipes are very ritual based. They will tell you the moon phase that you should be doing it. They'll be telling you the candle colour, the incense, all of those correspondences that you would usually have to get 7 or 8 books to look up all of the different intentions into your spell work via different magical correspondence. It's all done for you. I've done the legwork, so you don't have to worry about that. And again, every single ritual recipe is a vehicle for information. So you're not just doing a spell, it's teaching you something about a folk magic practice such as a witch bottle, teaching you something about the history of a plant or a herb or a spice. So yeah, I obviously recommend my book. I really wanted to create something that would sort of encompass all of the things that I use, all of the things that I've learned, and also just make it fun. So now I'm going to do a sort of quick fire round of some of the other books that I really recommend, because so I went to a festival this weekend. I got back only this morning. I'm so tired. I don't know how I'm still able to waffle with you right now. And so many people came to see me speak at 9:30 in the morning, so I can't believe what an amazing crowd I had at such an early time in the morning. So thank you for coming if you did come along to that. But someone asked me about books about folklore, because obviously I spoke a lot about folklore during my talk, and I speak a lot about folklore on this channel. So they asked me where I find these folk tales and if I recommend any books about folklore. So I'm going to go through these really quickly. The Little Book of Folklore, I dip in and out of this. I think it's a very cute little pocket book. So both beautifully illustrated. Is the Treasury of British Folklore and the Treasury of Folklore, Seas and Rivers, Sirens, Selkies and Ghost Ships. Gorgeous books, really interesting, so much folklore in both of them. I absolutely love them. And then closely associated to folklore, I would call them folklore, is fairy tales. So this is a book of English fairy tales and legends, and it's by Rosalind Kirvin. All three of these have really nice illustration work in them. Obviously, British and British Isles folklore is, you know, very much my jam. I'm very into it, but I'm also really interested in folklore from all over the world. And I love this book. This is from, I can't remember what museum I got it from. I think I got it from the British Museum. How embarrassing. So this is world mythology in bite-sized chunks. This is by no means a full compendium of world mythology, because that book would be so thick. If you see something that interests you, I recommend you do further reading. This is, you know, this is not the be all and end all of the mythology and folklore of the entire planet, but I've learned some really interesting things in this. Just like the Correspondence books, it's really interesting to see how folklore, how myth, how legend differs, and also the similarities across the whole globe. Lastly, I love this book about folklore. This is called Rebel Folklore, beautifully illustrated. My friend Ruby got this book for me, so I love it because she bought it for me. And again, it's folklore from all over the world. It might be a creature or a myth or a legend from Chinese folklore or Caribbean folklore, and it's really interesting. Highly recommend. Again, another one to sort of dip in and out. Continuing the quick fire round, here are a few random books that I haven't really categorized. I got a couple of zines from a market that I went to, I think. This one is Plants Against Patriarchy, invoking the magical allyship of plants, sort of about how plants and feminism intersect. Really, really interesting. I would read an entire thick book about this, because yeah, plants and feminism actually can't be separated. They're very, very intertwined. There's a reason they call it Mother Nature. And then this one is Healing Your Magical Body with Plants and Minerals. Again, just a very cute little zine about medicinal cures, medicinal properties. And I like these little zines because this is kind of how plant medicine should be used. You know, it should be sort of lowbrow information. This is the whole point of the folklore behind the plants. It's an accessible way for people to remember what these plants do for the body, how they can help people, how they can cure people, and pass it on, pass it on, pass it on. So this is sort of continuing that legacy. So I really always try and buy these kind of zines when I see them, to support the creators of that, because, you know, they're not trying to make a buck, they're trying to get the information out there. This one, again, it's quite random. It's Mindfulness in Gardening, Meditations on Growing and Nature by Ark Redwood. Just a really sweet little book about some of the ways that you can add intention, ritual, mindfulness into gardening. I mean, I don't even have a garden right now, but some of the ideas, the premises behind the little sections in here, I found really helpful, and I've sort of adapted them and used them in my own practice, which is more about cooking, going out into nature, foraging. This is the Witchinary. Again, I was sent this book. I didn't actually buy this book, I was sent it. It's by Deb Robinson, and it's an A to Z of like the meanings of words that you might come across in the witchcraft and Wicca community. So this is a great one for, you know, I don't necessarily love the term baby witches, but anyone who's new to witchcraft or is new to the idea of Wicca, paganism. It's just really useful. So if you don't know what something means, if you're new to all this stuff, you can just quickly look it up. I've got a couple of books about sigils. So I went to see a talk by a chaos magician at Treadwell's called Mark Vincent, and I bought his book about sigils. I'm yet to properly read this. I've dipped in and out, but his talk was amazing, and he basically described exactly how I feel about magic. So I was like, wow, maybe I'm a chaos magician, maybe I'm a chaos witch. This I bought recently. It's an exploration of astrology and nutrition, how astrology was linked to different body parts. I've written an ebook called The Zodiac Diet. I will link it below. I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm going to do a full video about it. This I picked up recently when I was in Wales. It is Ecology and Spirituality, A Brief Introduction, and it's by Jack Hunter. I haven't read all of it yet, but I'm about halfway, and it's an amazing book. It's so interesting to see how these two interconnect. And I'm not going to go into it because this video is already way too long, but I'm a big fan of this book and I can't wait to properly finish it. Over 10 years ago, when I was at university and I was doing a project about witches, well, it wasn't directly about witches, it was kind of about curses. It was such a strange project. Anyway, I bought this book when I was at uni to investigate the sigils and some of the iconography of the sigils that I could use. And now we get on to the last section. Again, I'm going to speed through it. This is the research section because, again, I'm a curious person, and a lot of my practice, because I create my own rituals, my own spell work, I've got to get those ideas from somewhere. Obviously, I use the correspondences of the plants and the herbs and the magical ingredients using these sort of encyclopedias, but where do I get the ideas for how to create these rituals? So this is the research section. And again, it's very British Isles heavy, not because I'm not interested in witchcraft from all over the world. It's just that I'm primarily doing research for my own spells that I then teach or share with others. So I kind of like to stick to the stuff that's relevant to where I live. So a couple of books about the history of witchcraft is In the Defense of Witches. Really good book. I think this kind of kicked off. There was a period where you sort of saw it everywhere. Really good book just about the history of witchcraft and persecution, and again, why and how that intersects with the oppression of women in general, especially in Europe. This is the history of witchcraft. This doesn't have a particularly feminist slant. It's not making an argument. This is more of an essay, just like arguing for how feminism intersects with witchcraft. Again, they're synonymous, so there's no getting away from the fact that the vast majority of people who were persecuted during the witch craze were women, but this is more just, very factual exploration of that history, where it came from. This one is the Book of English Magic. Very wordy, as you can see. It's a big book. It's just an absolute wealth of information. It can be a little bit overwhelming in how much information is in there. It's not really broken down into bite-sized pieces, but I do still try and dip in and out of it. I definitely haven't read it cover to cover, but it's a really good one. A few books from the Witchcraft Museum in Cornwall. This one is The Black Toad, West Country Witchcraft and Magic. This one is called Ill Wished, and it's specifically about Cornwall. So this is Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways. This one my friend Tyler got for me. This is Essex Witches by Peter C. Brown. I'll admit I haven't read this yet. I have dipped into it a little bit. I'm currently based sort of on the border of Essex right now, so I really want to do a deep dive into the witches of Essex, because Essex is actually weirdly quite a witchy place. This is the English Year. It's not witchcraft specific by any means, but it is a month-to-month guide, day by day in fact, of England's customs, the festivals, from May Day to Mischief Night, just really interesting folk customs. So you're actually balanced on my next set of books, so I'm gonna have to move you. I'm sorry if I look vastly different. I think you're a lot lower, but I've had to take my other pile of books down and you were balancing on this pile. Again, I'm going to go through it super quickly. This is a book called Pagans, which is the visual culture of pagan myths, legends and rituals, and it's I just use it for visual inspiration for my work. So my illustration work, my rituals, my spells. And because I'm interested in the history of witchcraft and the history of witches and how they were perceived and how they were seen, and also myth and the occult and the esoteric and mythology, it's all very well and nice to read words about that, but this adds texture. This is a compendium of the occult. Really interesting book, so inspirational for me in my spell work, because I like my rituals, especially my recipe rituals, I like them to link to something historical, some form of folk magic, some practice that people were doing, you know, eons ago. I just think it's fun. I think it's like history come to life. We've only got a couple more to go. Stick with me. This one is called Spellbound, and so it's a huge compendium of lots of different esoteric artifacts and history about them. So this is one of the places where I read about and learned about witch bottles, for example. A very similar book to that is this one, Of Shadows, 100 Objects from the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. This is by Sarah Hannett and Simon Costin. And again, it's a collection of artifacts, what they are, what they mean, what they were used for. So that's how I create my videos. That's how I create, you know, all of my projects. I'm just continually eating ideas through books and then regurgitating them to you through my own lens. So I am going to leave it there because I have been talking for a really long time and I'm incredibly tired because I haven't had much sleep this weekend. Please buy my book, which is Kitchen Magic. I will leave a link below. So by the time you watch this video, my book will be out in just a couple of days. So please buy it. I really appreciate anyone who even looks at the link or shows any kind of interest. And yeah, if you're watching this video after the book has already come out and after you have the book, please let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear, because I am too scared to go and look at any kind of review page. So if you just let me know, I'd love to see it. If you have any book recommendations of your own that you want to leave in the comments and share with the community, I know that other people watching this video would really appreciate that. I'm getting asked about the books that I use all the time, but I realize that mine are quite an eclectic mix because of what I do. I am gonna go and have a big lie down. I'm gonna go and drink my tea, and yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week.